This series contains adult language and descriptions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Cavalry Audio.
Welcome back to Death by Southwest, the podcast where each week I share a different grisly murder story unique to the American Southwest, while my sister and co-host tries to piece together the clues and unravel the mystery behind each of these heinous crimes. I'm your host, Margot, and I'm here with my sister and co-host,
Jenna.
And today, on today's episode, we're diving into the violent murder of Stephane Murphey, a 37-year-old Albuquerque flight attendant whose life was tragically cut short in April of 1999. We'll look into the many shocking missteps throughout this widely underpublicized investigation that left Stephane's family wondering if they would ever find the answers they so desperately needed to get justice for their daughter.
Stephane
37
Murphey. Years old, 1999, Houston. Ooh, that's wrong.
New Mexico. So remember why we are doing a New Mexico one?
Because we had a listener give that suggestion, correct?
She said, you've not done a New Mexico one. We were like, oh yeah, we have. And then I thought, oh my God, we haven't. So this is the New Mexico one we found. And I want to preface this. I don't want to qualify it, but I want to preface it by saying that I found there's a lot of murders, unfortunately, everywhere. But I found two great murder stories in New Mexico. One of them has been covered pretty heavily by other podcasts. This one I have not seen on any podcast. And a lot of information that I got was from the victim's sister, who put out a blog and shared, intimate details from the entire murder and investigation and everything. And when I looked into it a bit further and realized no one has covered this, it broke my heart a little bit for her. And I thought it would be interesting to tell this story.
But why do you think this one in particular versus the other one or two or any even not in New Mexico, why do you think this is one that hasn't been more heavily researched or publicized? I don't know the word.
There's no nice way to say this, to be honest, but there's not a lot of glitz and glamour to this. It's a terrible murder.
It's a straight awful murder.
Yeah.
Okay.
I found a lot of interest in like I said in that intro, the missteps that the police took. There was a lot that fucked this case up and this investigation up, and I found that to be super interesting. But outside of that, it was pretty straightforward in the sense of someone was murdered.
And there was a killer.
Yeah, period. But before we get into this murder of Stephane Murphey, we're going to talk about New Mexico. Tell me what you think of New Mexico.
I haven't spent a lot of time in New Mexico. I love White Sands, New Mexico, which is one of the coolest, dopest places I've ever camped, let alone visited. And so White Sands is like an old missile.
I remember you telling me this.
So all over White Sands, it's if you find any debris or any old shell casing, don't pick them
touch
up.
them.
Yeah. And also New Mexico, at least around Albuquerque, and I think most of New Mexico is quite known for Hatch green chilies.
Ooh. Oh, I think I have a fun fact about that, actually.
Okay. So that's pretty much all I know. And then I have a couple friends who grew up in Silver City, New Mexico.
Okay. So what I know about Albuquerque is I've driven through there a bunch when I was living in Atlanta and driving out to Tucson. That's an easy route to go through. Mm-hmm. And when I was moving here last year, I drove through Albuquerque and stayed at a La Quinta.
Oh.
And
because dogs are allowed.
And I had both dogs and the cat.
Hey, La Quinta.
Mm-hmm. So I saw Katie, who I went to school at U of A with, and she lives in Albuquerque. I got in late. I got in 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, and it was raining, and I was and there was the hot air balloon festival in Albuquerque.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So there was a ton of people staying there. So we'd been driving for 16 hours. I went inside and I was like, hey, I'm checking in. I booked a room. They gave me a key. I pulled the car around to like the back door that was closest to my room. And I took Henry first because he's the most difficult. So I was like, I'm going to take him first. I'm going to go up to the room. So I took him, went up through the back room, went up to the room, put my key in, didn't work. Put my key in, didn't work. Third time, didn't work. I was like, oh my God. So I had to get back in the elevator, go back down to the lobby. And like, Henry is not a super easy dog.
But you weren't trying to hide Henry. They knew about Henry.
No, yeah. 2 dogs stay free at La Quinta.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not trying to
Still
hide
challenging.
him.
You're not even just bringing like yourself down the
I'm
elevator.
not trying to like run into other dogs or have him create a problem.
You're just trying to make it there. You've been driving all day. You're tired,
exhausted,
hungry.
So I go down to the office, to the front desk, and I'm like, hi, my key doesn't work. And she's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me like fix it for you. She like does something, gives me a new key. And I was like, great. Thanks so much. Go back. I go back up. 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. Doesn't work. Again.
I would have gone and slept in my car.
I go back down. I'm like, it doesn't work still. She's like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. I don't know what's going on with the key reader thing. Gives it to me again. I go back up. It still doesn't work. 3rd time now. I am exhausted and I'm carting this like hyperactive dog through.
And your other
the
animals are
hotel.
still in the car.
Izzy and Kat are in the car. And so after the 3rd time it doesn't work, I take Henry back to the car. I go back to the front desk. I'm like, I cannot go up to my room again. I have animals. I can't do this again. I need a key that works. So the guy comes up with me.
Fun.
He does it. It works. And I put the little like door stopper thing.
Yeah, because I'm thinking, once you leave, is it going to work?
Right. So I put the door stopper thing so that wouldn't happen. I brought up Henry. Then I went back down. I brought up Izzy. Then I went back down. Then I brought up Kat. And at this point, Katie is like, hi, are you there? Because I texted her when I got there. I'm like, yeah, I'm here. Give me 20 minutes. I'll change my clothes. I'm ready to go have a drink. We're like 45 minutes in. I haven't even gotten into my room yet. Anyway, she came. She was so sweet. She brought a bottle of wine. And we like drank wine in the room and I fed the animals. And then we went out for a drink or 2. I saw her house. It was adorable in Albuquerque. And then also Oliver filmed the cleaning lady there. That's where it was filmed. So that night he was supposed to come meet me and Katie for a drink. And I love Oliver very, very much, but he's also
Flaky as fuck.
Incredibly flaky.
Yeah.
So I'm texting him like, hey, we're here. I'm like half a mile from your hotel. Come meet me for a drink. Nothing. And then the next morning I woke up and left and drove to Tucson and heard from him like, sorry, I was, doing something. And New Mexico reminds me of one of my top 5 favorite shows.
Oh, Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Because they are in
Albuquerque.
They are.
Okay, so I'm going to do some New Mexico fun facts, and then I'm going to do some Albuquerque fun facts, and then we're going to jump into the story. New Mexico has the highest percentage of blank residents of any state in the United States. In fact, almost half of the state's population is blank.
Indigenous.
No.
White.
No.
Okay, so Hispanic.
Hispanic and Latino people are half of the state's population.
Oh.
Okay, so the Roswell UFO incident is one of the most famous alleged UFO sightings in history, and it took place in New Mexico in 1947. The incident has been the subject of much speculation and controversy. Interesting.
Fact.
I don't have much to say on it. Yeah, fact.
Well, that's a fact.
Yeah. The state has an official state question. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that is cool.
I want to know what you think this means. This is the question. Red or green?
Chili.
Good job. This refers to the choice of red or green chili sauce that's often served with New Mexico cuisine. Very nicely done. This is interesting. The Carlsbad Caverns in southeastern New Mexico are home to a large bat population. Every evening at sunset, thousands of bats emerge from the caves to feed. Like, how many cities have these weird bat things? Because it was Austin, Tucson, and now Albuquerque. The state has a unique tradition called breaking the matanza, which involves slaughtering a pig and cooking it in a pit over an open fire. The event is a celebration of the state's agricultural heritage and is often accompanied by music and dancing.
So they slaughter a pig and dance.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't love it.
This we already talked about. It's home to the largest hot air balloon festival in the world.
You saw that, or you were there
I
during
was
that
there,
time. Yeah.
The Albuquerque International Balloon Fiesta. It attracts hundreds of hot air balloons and thousands of visitors each year. I actually have some pictures from that I will post.
Ooh, have you ever been in a hot air balloon?
No, I can't decide if I would like it or not. What do you think?
I've been in one.
You have?
Yeah.
When?
Maybe in like 2011, Michael took me in one. It was so cool. And I didn't know if I would like it either, but it was at 5 a.m. He woke me up and said, get up, get dressed. It was dark. We drove to the place. We got in. It was just us two and a guy. And so I didn't have a chance to think about it. It was fucking crazy. I drove in the dark. The sun was rising. We got in the little basket and it went boop, boop. It was really interesting.
I think I'd
I'm
like
afraid
it, but
of
I think
heights.
I wouldn't like it. Oh, I don't think I am.
Well, then I think you'd like it overall because it'd be an adventure and you're not terrified maybe of heights.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you heard of a town called Tucumari? Tucumari.
Tucumari.
Just no.
Oh. Isn't it Tucumari? It's like Tucamori?
Tucumcari.
Oh.
Tucumari.
Then no.
Oh.
Because I'll tell you what I was thinking of. No, just go on.
It's located on historic Route 66, and it's known for its many neon signs. It's become a popular destination for travelers seeking a taste of retro Americana.
Wow, that's awesome. I want to go there.
That's why I was asking you, because I was like, I kind of want to go there. I wonder if you've been.
Is that outside of Albuquerque or just somewhere in New Mexico?
Somewhere in New Mexico. These have all been kind of broad New Mexico facts, not super specific to Albuquerque. So Albuquerque is located at an elevation of 5,312 feet, making it one of the highest major cities in the United States. Isn't that weird?
That is the highest?
One of the highest. That's what this says.
5,000 is one of the highest?
Yeah, I guess so. Albuquerque was also the setting for the hit TV show Breaking Bad, and many of the show's iconic locations can be visited in the city, including Walter White's house and the car wash where he worked.
I hear that's like a huge, big...
I bet it's huge, yeah. Albuquerque is also home to the world's largest collection of rattlesnakes at the American International Rattlesnake Museum.
So they have like taxidermied rattlesnakes, I imagine.
I would imagine. The Sandia Mountains, which overlook Albuquerque, are named for their pinkish color at sunset, which resemble the color of watermelon, which is sandia in Spanish.
You know what that makes me think of? The mountains are pink. It's time to drink.
Whoa, what's that from?
I don't know. It's just a old sailor's phrase or something.
I like that. We're going to jump into this murder story now of Stephane Murphey. And I'll be honest, when I was researching this, her name is spelled like this. Are you ready? Stephane. And so the entire time
Stefan.
I was reading it like Stephane.
Oh, okay, yeah. But it's Stephanie.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, what's her last name?
Murphey.
Murphy. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. And I only know that because there is one. This story was highly underpublicized. There are, as far as I can tell, no podcasts out there that have covered this. There is one YouTube video, and it's a local news story from Albuquerque about more towards the conclusion. I'm not going to say anything because I don't want to give too much away. And in that, they say Stephanie. So that let me know that like it's Stephanie. There's just no I in there. So we are going to get into the murder of Stephane Murphey, who was 37 at the time she was murdered. She was murdered in Rio Rancho, which was just outside of Albuquerque, on April 15th, 1999. Before we kind of get into the actual crime, let's get to know Stephanie a little bit. And I want to put this out there that a lot of this information came from her sister created, after she died, created a blog site and wrote this long kind of story about her death and about the investigation and from her firsthand experience. And a lot of the information I got was actually from here because, like I said, I want to say there was maybe total, and I searched for days on this story, maybe 10 articles total about this. Like it was there was really not a lot out there.
So there may be little gaps and things that are missing, obviously, and maybe
Right.
no one would know that except for the immediate family, close friends, because it's
Right.
not publicized.
Right.
What's the sister's first name?
Ari. Arry.
Cool. I mean, parents were into interesting, unique spellings.
I actually don't know if that's how you pronounce her
Sure,
sister's
that's
name,
your best guess.
But Ari, I'm assuming.
Arry.
Yeah, I'm assuming.
What else
that's
would it
how you
be?
Pronounce it right. Then there's also a kind of a memorial page to Stephanie. So I wanted to share a little bit about her before we get into the actual crime. Stephanie was born on September 1st, 1961 and died on April 15th, 1999. Her parents were Robert and Carol Murphy. Her sister was Ari Murphy Frank, hyphenate. She was the niece of a woman named Kathleen Manigoats.
Love it.
I know, it's such a cool name. And apparently she was the favorite aunt of a nephew named Alex Murphy. So according to family and her sister, Stephanie was a kind, gentle, and loving person. She was dedicated to her family, her home, and her career, and her two cats who were named Penelope and Pierre. And this is one of my favorite things. So Pierre was named Pierre because his coloring on his face kind of looked like a crooked beret on his head. So she named him
Frenchman.
Pierre. Yeah, like a Frenchman. Yeah, it was super.
That's
I thought it was
cute.
really cute. So she loved her cats. She loved and she loved her job. She was a flight attendant.
What airline did Stephanie work for?
She was a flight attendant for Continental Airlines.
Oh,
So as a kid, she was said to be very high spirited, but also a little bit shy. But then as an adult, she became what her sister called a bright, funny, and confident adult with many interests who loved life and loved adventure. A lot of people said that about her, what I read, that she was very adventurous. She had always dreamed of being an astronaut when she was younger.
is this me? 'Cause that's my age, too.
No. But her compromise kind of when she grew up was to become a flight attendant for Continental Airlines because she could travel all over the world.
Yep.
And she did. She was an avid gardener. She considered herself to be a gourmet cook and baker. She always made the pies at Thanksgiving for her family. And she loved to travel. So as an international flight attendant, she was able to kind of go to all the different corners of the world and explore a lot of different cultures. Her sister said, quote, she was just as comfortable riding on a camel in China as she was playing with her two cats in her home.
I don't think I'd like being a flight attendant.
I don't either. I think it would be really lonely.
I think it'd be great for the travel, cheap travel. Forget about when you're working and get to travel places, but you get a huge discount, right? You can fly standby free.
Yeah.
Also, yeah, I get lonely, maybe, but what if you had great friends in your airline flight attendants? And maybe my body and my brain would get used to it, but I feel so like it's depleting my dry skin. And I'm afraid of plane crashes. Thank you, flight attendants.
Yeah. So that was Stephanie Murphy in a nutshell. And on the afternoon of April 15th, 1999, Stephanie went to Gold's Gym. Then she went to Blockbuster Video, which is amazing. And then she went to Lucky's Supermarket in Rio Rancho. Sometime around dusk on that night of April 15th, a neighbor saw her pull into her driveway at 1140 Mara Way in Rio Rancho. That was the last time that she was ever seen alive.
Don't miss what happens next in today's episode. We'll be right back after a short message from our sponsors.
On April 18th, 1999,
3 days further.
yep, no one had heard from her and people were worried. So her friends reported her missing to the police, alerted her parents, and people were concerned at this point. The Rio Rancho Police Department went to her home to do a welfare check, and they entered her home and found that the home had appeared to be broken into and burglarized. And her vehicle was also missing.
Oh, okay.
So this was April 18th. So people are just concerned at this point. On April 19th, a woman living in the Warren Coronado Apartments called the police to complain about a terrible smell coming from a vehicle that was parked behind Building C in her apartment complex. That evening, around 9 p.m., police arrived and discovered that the car being complained about was a blue 1988 Chevy Spirit with the license plate MIRCLME. Miracle Me, essentially. This car belonged to Stephane Murphey. And upon further investigation, they located where that smell was coming from. It was Stephane's badly decomposed body found in the back seat of her own vehicle, strangled by her own leggings. And the fact that her body was so badly decomposed meant that police believe that she had been driven around Albuquerque for 4 days in the backseat of her own car before the killer dumped the car and her body in the parking lot of this kind of random apartment complex.
How far was it from?
Couple miles.
Not far.
Not far.
Okay.
But not relevant. Like, she didn't know anyone who lived there.
Right.
It wasn't
was a
pertinent.
random
It was
choice
random.
of a place to dump the car.
Police quickly came to believe that the apparent burglary in her house, because remember, they entered her house and they were like, oh, it's been burglarized.
Shit's been fucked with.
Yeah, that was 4 days beforehand.
Right.
So they then, after they found her body, thought, maybe that burglary was an attempt to cover up an actual homicide. Upon doing an autopsy, results also showed a good probability that she had been sexually assaulted before she had been strangled.
Way to ruin my Thursday night.
True, I know. Yeah. So because her body was found in Albuquerque, even though she lived in Rio Rancho,
Which was like a suburb, let's say,
suburb,
right?
like very, very close. There was a little bit of confusion over the jurisdiction over this case, which caused a problem initially that continued throughout all of it.
Whose jurisdiction? The
Yes.
city limit?
Yes.
Was it
is
city
it
limits?
Rio Rancho Police Department
Right.
or is it Albuquerque Police Department?
Right.
So the Rio Rancho Department of Public Safety asked the Albuquerque Police Department to process the crime scene. Unfortunately, this ask came a little bit too late because at the point that they asked, the Rio Rancho investigators and detectives had already processed the crime scene as a burglary, not a murder, because no body had been found. So they went into her place to do a welfare check. They were like, oh, it's a burglary. We're going to process it as a burglary.
Meaning they like
It's
looked
just not
through,
as thorough as a murder investigation.
But they like did whatever they were going to do with that burglary investigation and then said, we did it.
Wasn't much because they had let people walk around the house before taking fingerprints.
Wow.
So
That's
they
helpful.
went into her house. Some of her friends had come over to see what was going on. They let their friends walk through the house. In fact, one of Stephane's friends stepped in a red stain in the bedroom, on the bedroom floor, and turned to police and said, what is this? Do you think this is blood? And the cop said, no, I'm sure that's just like a stain from refinishing furniture or something.
Well, that's like a very random counter response to blood.
As it turned out, it was Stephane's blood. And it was probably the exact spot where she had been murdered.
Oh.
But the police thought it was nothing and they kind of just wrote it off. But at some point, the Rio Rancho Department of Public Safety decided to reclaim the case and essentially told Albuquerque police to butt the fuck out, which seemed like a very strange decision. And this is so weird to me.
But why? Why is it a strange decision?
Because the Rio Rancho Police Department didn't have a homicide department.
Right. They're much smaller, less resources, I imagine.
Yes, they had no experience investigating a murder. So that was kind of a weird thing, number one. And honestly, I would say like keep a tally because the weird things in this case and the shitty things that happen in this case are going to just build up. The car, Stephane's car, no evidence hold was ever placed on her car. It was towed to an impound yard the day after it was found. And a couple of weeks later, Stephane's mother received a notice in the mail addressed to Stephane from the impound yard saying that they were going to crush the car if she didn't come down and pay
pick it up or pay it.
Yeah. So Stephane's mom called and said, like, that car it's supposed to be in evidence. That's my daughter's car. She was found dead in that car. What are you doing? They didn't have any answers for her. And days later, the car was completely crushed. So according to Stephane's sister, this investigation from this point on, it was just bumbled in every possible way. And some people thought that this was because there was kind of like an egotistical kind of feud between the Rio Rancho detective and the Albuquerque detective.
Can they not work together?
Apparently they cannot, because they did not.
Right.
So there was so much physical evidence in the case that the Rio Rancho Department of Public Safety and Police Department just seemed to not give a fuck about. First and foremost, the family was told that the Albuquerque police wouldn't give the Rio Rancho police access to the forensic evidence that they had collected. Later, the Rio Rancho police learned that this wasn't true, and then they were finally given the evidence. But for whatever reason, they then, once they were given it, never examined it. The evidence sat in the Rio Rancho evidence locker unopened until the family actually had to hire a private detective that urged them to examine the evidence.
Maybe this is the only like semi-potential reasonable thought I had around why they wouldn't examine the forensic evidence is maybe Rio Rancho, again, didn't have the adequate individuals, investigators,
resources.
To
you're
have
right.
someone.
That's true. That might be true. I don't know.
Still not
Well,
adequate.
then pass it back to Albuquerque
Right,
PD.
or-
Find someone else
Right,
to
yeah.
analyze it,
Yeah.
As if her family wasn't already frustrated enough that oh my God, is it Albuquerque? Is it Rio Rancho? Who's examining it? Nobody's examining it. It's just sitting there. They were already so stressed out. The state crime lab in Santa Fe, which they were hoping would process the evidence gathered from her car, had refused to do so.
Why?
And the reason was that there was no defined suspect in the case.
Wow, is that really a reason? Aren't we doing this to find a potential defined suspect in the case?
You would hope so. But what I've kind of learned, and I will be brutally honest here, it's a deep hole that I didn't go too far down. But apparently New Mexico law, state law, is really kind of, it's not great.
Around murder investigations or in general?
In general, and certainly around murder investigations, it is. It's not in favor of the victims, is what I understand.
Okay.
Yeah. So the Santa Fe State Crime Lab, they were hoping would process this. They didn't because there was no suspect. This was a crushing blow to Stephane's family, who had been holding out hope that they would provide some answers from the lab work. So they were desperately searching for answers. And Stephane's sister took it upon herself, Ari, to contact the lab and inquire about the refusal. The lab seemed confused, what she said. She reached out. She was like, why are you refusing to process this? And the lab was like, what are you talking about?
Why wouldn't we refuse?
We didn't refuse to process this.
Oh.
They said, we were absolutely willing to process this, but the Rio Rancho detective in charge of this case sent a box of just random evidence with no instructions, no anything, no context, nothing. And so they didn't know what to do with it. They were like, oh, why do we have this? We don't know what to do with it. And he never contacted them. So it wasn't necessarily that they wouldn't. It was that the Rio Rancho detective on this case wasn't providing the necessary information.
Sounds like they weren't really communicating adequately.
At all.
Also, that still kind of strikes me in some way of they got a box of unmarked evidence or whatever it was.
It's a little weird.
And also, I get that doesn't have specific instructions, and also a box of unmarked or non-instructional evidence.
Place, figure out what to do. Yeah.
Just still look into it, right?
Yeah. Frustrating, nonetheless, for the family. This wasn't the end of the family's frustration, because when the lab requested additional items from the car, like Mylar tapings from the car to check that hairs were Stephane's or weren't Stephane's, car seat covers, and there was a towel from Stephane's bathroom that was covered in blood and discovered in her car. But the police flat out refused to send any of these additional items, like that tape with hair samples and this bloody towel, wouldn't send it. apparently there was repeated requests to get these items examined by forensics and CSI. They didn't arrive until the following spring, long after the family had been promised that they were on the way. I mean, like, we're talking months and months and months and months.
Like, what? Why? I want to know why. And I also want to know, even if there is a why, they eventually came back around months later in the next spring or whatever.
Right.
So, like, why that too?
Right. Well, I mean, and that's the exact question. The family is, like, at this point, wondering why. Why are police withholding evidence? Why are they not processing evidence? Why is it such a struggle to get any answers from anybody? And what else are they hiding?
Can you imagine how maddening, frustrating, awful, overwhelming that would be?
No.
If your loved one had been murdered and police are just fucking lollygagging. And this is from what I know. I'm not saying they are, but it sounds like they're fucking lollygagging.
They are.
It's like,
they
can you
absolutely are.
Imagine that?
No, I would be, I mean, because you're already going through so much grief and heartache already. And then to have to be fighting on top of that would be just terrible, which, I mean, this case had 1,000 twists and turns at this point that the police were not following up on. And it almost seemed like the people who were supposed to be helping Stephanie's family were kind of working against them.
Like muddying the waters.
Yeah, obstructing justice, and nobody could understand why. So by January 2000, Stephanie's family was obviously beyond desperate for answers. The lead detective on the case told them that he had hit a dead end and that there were no leads, and they were kind of left with this sense of despair. But they weren't ready to give up. So they asked the detective, who said, I got nothing. Like, I got nothing to go on. They said, can we please hire a PI, a private investigator?
They also probably didn't have to ask that person. But
probably not, but they were like hoping that this guy would be like in their corner.
Yeah.
So it's like, we'd like to hire a private investigator, maybe a fresh set of eyes, to like crack the case open in a different way. And the detective agreed, but sadly, their hopes were pretty quickly shattered because they did hire a private investigator, but that private investigator was met with hostility and sabotage at every turn.
From the police department.
Yep. The lead detective refused to cooperate, canceled appointments, canceled meetings, wouldn't share information that could have really helped to solving the case. And he just didn't want to do it. Despite these setbacks, Stephanie's family persisted. They were determined to uncover the truth about why she was murdered, who murdered her. But it's undeniable that every hour that they spent searching for information was costing them a fortune. By August of that same year of 2000, they had spent $15,000 trying to pick up the pieces that the police had kind of fumbled and left behind.
Well, that's 15 months after her disappearance / murder.
Yeah.
Because it was April 99 and now we're in August 2000.
Right.
Wow.
So they had, the detective had said, like, yeah, go ahead, hire a PI. So they hired a PI. And the PI basically had to kind of like re-examine this entire case from start to finish and discovered so many things that the family had no idea about. She discovered that the police detective didn't tape his interviews with any potential suspects. No interview tapes, nothing. So she had to go back and re-interview every potential witness in the case and realized that a lot of the information was different than what this police detective had taken like light notes on.
I was just going to ask, did he take notes? And then I said, Jenna, don't ask that because that doesn't fucking matter.
No,
I mean,
he
it
did.
matters.
It does matter. He
well,
did.
It matters.
He took light notes.
But it's not... He
but
could write whatever he fucking wanted on that notepad.
Of course, and he didn't record it.
Right, that's the point.
So the family's PI continued to uncover more and more things that previously had been withheld from Stephanie's family, which is just shocking. I mean, like, blows my mind. So police reports and crime scene photos that had never been shared with the family were finally revealed thanks to the PI. And this shed a lot of new light on her murder. Up until this point, the family basically was in the dark. They were relying on like scraps of little evidence from the police and then everything else from the media.
So they had, at this point, the family at least, and it sounds like the police department or departments or whatever were withholding some things. But the family really had nowhere to land with this. They had no kind of identifiable potential person. And who knows in their minds, but
Totally.
outwardly, no one.
No one.
Okay.
There was like no one.
Okay.
So it had even taken months for the family to get a death certificate. And even then, they were denied access to crucial information. The autopsy report, which actually held a major clue to attempting to find out who had killed Stephanie, it had been released to the press before it was given to the family. The family had no idea that Stephanie had even been raped until they saw it on NBC Nightly News.
You mentioned death certificate and then the autopsy report. On the death certificate, I believe it says cause of death.
Strangulation
Okay.
with her own leggings.
Yet they found out this awful, terrible
She'd also been sexually
additional
assaulted.
detail on 2020 or the nightly news or
The
whatever.
family never knew that. They saw it
Yeah.
on the fucking news. So once they were made aware of this, like once they saw this on the news, they immediately contacted the police and they were like, okay, let's get DNA. If she was raped, there could be DNA there. Maybe there's like a sperm sample there. They persuaded the police to do a DNA test and send it to the crime lab, hoping they would find a match for the sperm. However, they told the family they lost the sperm sample that they retrieved from her body. And then 1 year later, a startling discovery was made. The missing sperm slide was sitting in the lead detective's desk all along.
What?
Yeah.
Wow, way to hide it.
Obviously, Stephanie's family hoped that the lead detective would be their ally, but instead he proved to be absolutely their adversary. Beyond the fact that he didn't actually look that deeply into anything about this murder, he also made incredibly insensitive remarks to Stephanie's mother and sister. He suggested that Stephanie, who was an attractive blonde flight attendant, had provoked her killer. He also insinuated that Stephanie was drunk and had not noticed that the perpetrator was breaking into her home, which didn't even make sense because,
What does that matter?
well, she wasn't drunk.
I don't care if she was. It doesn't matter what you wear, what you drank,
Of
what you
course.
ingested, what you this, what you that.
Of course.
It doesn't fucking matter.
I know. So Stephanie's family waited for justice for 18 long months after her brutal murder. And their hopes of finding closure were dealt a devastating blow when they learned that the lead detective had never filed a police report, which meant that all the publicity they were trying to get on America's Most Wanted. They were trying to get on various like crime platforms, and they couldn't because you had to have an FBI or police report to submit, and he never submitted it, and so they never got on it.
Okay, so I don't know, obviously. You guys know I don't know the end of this, what the outcome is. The way you're leading, or not leading, but the way it's building up is like, well, this motherfucker, the head investigator of Rio Rancho, has some culpability.
We'll see.
You don't want to miss what happens next in today's murder story, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a short message from our sponsors.
So this lead detective in Rio Rancho eventually left the case.
I bet he did.
Yeah. And a new detective came on, and he was seemingly a little bit more cooperative, and he agreed to compare the DNA that was found in her Stephanie's fingernails with the bloody towel that was found in her car.
What about the one that
Sperm?
that was put in the drawer?
This
never
was
to be
also
found.
entered into evidence.
Thank
yes.
God. Thank
And
goodness.
the results revealed a male DNA match between the specimens, the bloody towel and under her fingernails. That was the biggest connection. And this prompted the family to demand that this DNA be submitted to the registry, to CODIS. But they still didn't have answers. The only time that they actually got information back and like there was some kind of, a fire under the ass of the people who were processing this was when Stephanie's parents went public and they were criticizing the Rio Rancho police, the Albuquerque police, the CSI, like everyone. They were like, our daughter's been murdered. We have all this evidence. What the fuck is happening? So
Good for
finally
them.
they got some stuff back and the DNA was submitted and it was a match with a man named David F. Bolog. Shockingly, Bolog was a neighbor who lived less than 200 feet from Stephanie's home and had a history of sexual assault and DWI arrests. But somehow, the police had never even questioned him.
Okay, well, the DWI doesn't mean anything to me.
No, sexual assaults, though.
It does, yeah. And also, I think...
Somebody's murdered and you have somebody who's been arrested for sexual assault 200 feet away?
Of course, anyone who's been convicted around the neighborhood, you go, even if they haven't, I imagine, you go around, talk to them.
Of course.
Check their backgrounds.
Totally.
Also, once they found out she had been sexually assaulted, raped, oh my goodness, especially look into the people in the neighborhood because I'm not saying they all actually go through with the registering, but you have to register if you're a sex offender. Do a thorough investigation.
Not all sex offenders offend again. Many do, many don't. Doesn't matter.
Ask them questions and investigate.
Exactly. And
talk
take
to
their
them.
DNA, take
see
their
where they were
fingerprints.
that evening.
They did not. So who is David Bolog? I don't have much on him, honestly. I'm going to say that in various court hearings, because he was arrested many times, various court hearings and court records, he was said to be pretty smart, easy to talk to, a great conversationalist, also known to have sociopathic tendencies, possible schizophrenia,
narcissism,
an interest in the occult, and a record of burglary and rape since his juvenile years, and someone who had no support outside of being in prison because he was in prison several times.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So the DNA matched. So this was the killer.
So he was the primary suspect.
He was the primary suspect.
So did he go to trial? What happened?
Yes, he did go to trial. Because of the many missteps in this case, it was not until 2002 that David Bolog, who was known to be a violent career criminal, was named as the primary suspect. And then it was not until 2006 that he went to trial and was sentenced.
Okay.
And I never said this earlier. This is a really interesting piece of information. So apparently Bolog, once they identified him in 2002, he was, I believe, already in jail. And
for a different crime.
For a different crime.
Okay.
He made a statement to police during a jailhouse interview. He admitted to this crime, to killing Stephanie, but it was deemed inadmissible because he had not been read his Miranda rights. So the prosecutors chose to pursue a plea deal for second-degree murder rather than go to trial for first-degree murder because of concerns that the jurors would not understand DNA evidence. During the trial, David Bolog's father, Cornell Bolog, told the judge that his son battled with schizophrenia and he asked for leniency in his sentencing. He also apologized directly to the family of Stephane Murphey and said that we send our condolences and we're so sorry for what you're going through. So after David's father's kind of statement, the judge told David, though many people are dealt a bad hand in life, this murder was a senseless act for which you have taken no responsibility. And because of that, I have no choice but to give you the maximum penalty possible. So in March 2006, David Bolog was sentenced to 21 years in prison on a plea bargain deal. He pleaded to second-degree murder, aggravated burglary, unlawful taking of a motor vehicle, and tampering with evidence. He showed zero remorse at the trial and chose not to speak or give any kind of statement during his sentencing. After the sentencing, Stephanie's mom said, "This would never have been solved without our constant flogging of the police, educating ourselves about solving crimes and being involved with other families in the same boat and using every avenue possible to keep the case alive. If the department had done a door-to-door canvass in the first week after the murder and looked at people with records in the neighborhood, we would have been saved 3 years and 66 days of frustration and agony. The suspect lived only a few doors down from our daughter and had a record. People should not be put in the position of having to solve their own daughter's murder." And then she went on to say, "I still have to keep the lights on at all times, but I no longer think that the bad man will come and hurt me. He is in jail. One thing I do fear is what the bad man will do when he is released from prison. I can only wish that Mr. Bolog will be put away forever and not put any more families through the agony that we have been through. He's a violent and evil person and a mad dog who should not be let loose on society." But unfortunately, her worst fears came true. Even though he was sentenced to 21 years, unfortunately, with time already served and credit for good behavior factored in, he was likely looking at less than 8 years in prison.
He killed someone.
Yes, but there was a weird law in New Mexico at the time, which didn't change until 3 months after his sentencing. This weird law that was like time served, and if you make a plea deal, and this, all these things that basically slashed his 21 years in half and then less than. So the most that he was going to serve was about 8 to 9 years. And that's exactly what happened. In January of 2015, Bolag was expected to be released from his high security unit at the Penitentiary of New Mexico outside of Santa Fe, having served just 8 years and 8 months for one of the most gruesome crimes in New Mexico's modern day history. He was 50 at the time, and he was scheduled to appear before a parole hearing. But it didn't really matter because apparently at the time, the state statute stated that his release was mandatory based on the parole board's approval to make a parole plan for him. And he would be released on 2 years of parole. Despite efforts by Stephane's family, who wrote to the board 80 letters at the last count. I mean, this was years ago, but at the last count. Apparently, most families, when they're writing against the parole board, they send about 7 letters per case. Her family wrote 80. Nonetheless, even though the parole board was nervous, had concerns, after 2 months, they were able to agree on a suitable and willing transitional program to release David Bolag to society. And at that moment, David Bolag, who had murdered Stephane Murphey, was free. In March, he went to a halfway house for sex offenders in Albuquerque's North Valley. He was under intensive supervision with a GPS ankle monitor. And the parole board chairwoman said, "We did everything in our power to assure public safety, which is our mandate. We want to get him back into society while still being under the state's watch."
Why him? I'm sure there are a lot of other people with less offensive, egregious crimes that they could reacclimate into society via halfway house or whatever else.
So in late May, Bolag moved to a motel after he got out of the halfway house. He had served his time in the halfway house. He got out, moved to a motel in Santa Fe, still under intense GPS supervision. And then in June, a friend of his connected him with a woman in Santa Fe who was apparently very lonely and looking for a roommate. And 1 month later, Bolag and this woman were living together. 1 month after moving into the Santa Fe home with her, this new female kind of partner, their relationship rapidly deteriorated from being roommates to romantic partners to something deeply disturbing and frightening. On the evening of July 30th, neighbors reported hearing loud yelling, crying, and what appeared to be a physical altercation, prompting them to call the police. When law enforcement arrived, they found the woman in a state of absolute terror, and they, in their police report, described her as having wide eyes, a pale complexion, and just being visibly, like actually physically shaking from fear. According to the criminal complaint, she reported that Bolag had told her he would never let her go, he would keep her for himself, and threatened to kill her. He was promptly arrested on a charge of assaulting a household member, which was a misdemeanor, punishable by up to 6 months in jail, but it would cause the revoke of his parole. He was still on parole at this point. This is less than, his parole was 2 years. This is within that 2 years. Now, here's where it really becomes frustrating, and you're going to be frustrated.
I'm going to frown.
Yeah, you're going to frown. You're going to be annoyed with me.
No, I'm not annoyed with you. I'm annoyed with New Mexico.
He was charged with assault, and he was set to appear before a parole board for a hearing to determine whether he would be returned to prison to serve out all of his initial sentencing for the Stephane Murphey murder, part of it or none of it. And his parole was not set to expire until November 16th. So this was in July. So this is the thing that I found, which is really weird. And I'm going to need you to make sure to make a note of this for the lookup list. Under New Mexico's bizarre laws, Returning Bolog to prison meant he would receive a day-for-day credit while incarcerated, essentially rewarding him for violating parole by cutting his remaining parole time for being behind bars and then returning him to the community with no safety measures or oversight in the place once his parole ended. It's almost like he's being rewarded because...
Well, you said reward for violating... I'm not saying you made that phrase up. But
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's something there. New Mexico, everything that I found in this case is like New Mexico has really fucking weird...
Well,
not
tune into
fair
the lookup
laws.
list because I'm going to really try and do my best to look that up. I don't
Yes.
know what I'll find. I may find nothing and then I'll leave you all hanging.
Yeah.
Just like Margot left us hanging.
And that's true. I mean, that was the latest. He assaulted his roommate turned lover in 2005, 2006, and he was about to go before the parole board. And when I tell you that I searched every name, every article, everything to find out, like, well, what happened? Was his parole revoked? Did he go back to jail for Stephanie? Is he out living in the world? Should we all be fucking worried?
Where
right
is
now?
he?
Where the fuck is this man?
Also, you just said something that I have to clarify because I think you said it wrong. Not wrong, but like misstepped. You said his roommate / turned
Lover.
romantic in 2005, 2006. No, we're talking 2015, right? Because initially he went to jail in 2005 or 2006, right?
Yeah, you're right. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, I just want to clarify.
right.
You can cut all that out. I
No,
don't think
no,
anyone
that's
would
okay.
catch that.
No,
but
that's
I just
okay.
wanted to make sure. Also, the bottom line is, where the fuck is he?
Where the fuck
Okay.
is
well,
this
that'll be,
man?
I'm going to try and,
I can't find it.
I mean, I probably won't if you can't.
my God,
I'm not
please.
very savvy with the internet,
And
but I'll
anyone
try.
who's listening, please try to find it. He moved in with this woman. He assaulted her. He was arrested. He was going to go before the parole board. And then what the fuck happened? There's nothing.
Okay. Well, to be continued, I guess.
Yeah.
If we want to put like a bookend on something, we know who killed Stephanie.
David Bullock.
Yeah.
And this poor family went through such hell to just find out who murdered their daughter, their sister. And they had to like do it themselves because the police were in a egotistical fight against whose territory
We don't
it
actually
is?
know. I mean, sure, it sounds like that.
There are still so many questions. So I think it would be, this is a case specifically, and often I've reached out to family members of the victims and don't hear anything, which I totally understand. I feel like people probably don't want to relive the most terrible moments in their life. But I would be super interested to speak to Stephanie's sister and hear what she has to say and just maybe find out a little bit more about this case that was just so frustrating. That's it. That is our episode today, episode 12, Stephane Murphey. And maybe we will be able to get in touch with the family and have some more answers. Either way, we will do our best to find some more answers in the lookup list. And we very much appreciate you listening. And
Hug your loved ones and good night and good luck.
thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
And if you want to see pictures of the victims, the murderers, and any additional related images, head over to our Instagram right now. Our handle across all social media platforms is death, then the letter X, and then Southwest spelled out. So DEATHX SOUTHWEST. Death X Southwest.
Death by Southwest is a Cavalry audio production.
Hosted by Jenna Schneider and Margot Carmichael.
Produced by Margot Carmichael.
Associate produced by Jenna Schneider.
Executive produced by Dana Brunetti and Keegan Rosenberger.
Audio editing and sound design by Revision Sound.
Music by Soundstripe.
And a special thanks to Edward R. Murrow for letting us borrow his famous sign-off phrase, good night and good luck.